Varsity Club, how is it going? Look, the NBA is in complete shambles right now, and there is a major trade that is maybe going to be happening soon. Whether you follow Shams or Woj, there's been a lot of talk about James Harden and what's going to be happening with him and Russell Westbrook and the rest of the Houston Rockets. And while I don't know exactly how likely the trade is going to be, there has been a lot of talk about James Harden saying that he wants to go back and play with some old friends that he used to play with in OKC. And those two friends are Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, who obviously play for the Brooklyn Nets. Now, me personally, I think that would be a horrible trade. I think there's just too many guys that want to shoot and are passive aggressive that probably wouldn't gel all the way together. But for the sake of seeing how it works out, I want to see if it actually can work out in NBA 2K and if they can win a title with all three of those guys together. Now, one thing I want to know before we get into this video is, do you think that a James Harden, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving led team can win an NBA championship? I'm curious what you think. And if you're loving the content that I've been dropping, for whether it's for NBA 2K or Madden or whatever I've been dropping on this channel, leave me a thumbs up in the video to help more people end up finding it, and subscribe if you haven't, because if you're enjoying it, why not subscribe? It helps out. Now, to make this a valid trade, it's not exactly easy, but here's what I think the Nets would ultimately have to give up if they wanted James Harden. Keep in mind, they could throw in Jared Allen, but I think the Nets would ultimately keep him. But here's what I think. The breakdown of the trade would ultimately be Spencer Dinwiddie, Karis LeVert. Again, those are the two guys that have been pretty much linked to this deal if it were to somehow happen. Timothy Luau, I can't pronounce his last name, Garrett Temple to help balance out the salary piece of it, and then a 2021 first round pick unprotected and a 2023 first round pick unprotected from Brooklyn, because you can't trade consecutive first round draft picks. I think the Knicks ended up making that rule happen because they were doing it all the time. And then ultimately the prize for the Nets would be James Harden. Now notice this does work from a salary cap standpoint for both teams. They can make it work. It's just a lot for James Harden, but ultimately he's probably worth it. So if you look to see what their actual starting lineup and the rotation would look like, it's kind of crazy to see Kyrie Irving, James Harden, and Kevin Durant. Again, Kyrie and James Harden never played together, but James Harden and Kevin Durant definitely did. Things would be, I think, pretty wild. They would have a power forward, Taurean Prince. DeAndre Jordan would be their starting center. And then off the bench, again, Jared Allen could be their starting center. You never know. You could have Joe Harris, Jamal Crawford, Nicholas Claxton, Chris Chiozza out of Florida, Tyler Johnson. And then from there, no one essentially really cares. But still, that is not a bad first 8 or so players on that team. So through the first month of the season, this Nets team is cooking. They're the #1 team ranked in the NBA. Harden's averaging 31 with 7 assists per game. Durant's averaging 27 with 5 rebounds and 4 assists a game. Kyrie's averaging 24.5 with 8.5 assists a game. I mean, the team is actually playing pretty well. Some of their bench players are doing okay, but honestly, you don't need a lot from these guys. I mean, Joe Harris should probably be having one of the most efficient years of his career because he's going to be open every single time. From a league leader standpoint, Damian Lillard is averaging nearly 40 a game through the first month of the season. Luke is killing it, Trae Young, LeBron James, but there's James Harden in the 5th spot. But again, a lot of buckets are being taken away from him, but his team is 11-2. They're the best in the NBA. So going up to the All-Star break, the Nets are 38-15. I mean, they're 10-3 in the last month. They're absolutely killing it, but the Celtics are tied with them right now. So that young core, despite not having nearly the salary that the Nets have, they're doing pretty well. Now, something to be noted with this team is that Kyrie actually suffered an injury. He's out for 4 to 6 weeks left right now. So that's obviously going to hamper them because they've got to play Bumpy Johnson as their point guard instead of Kyrie. So he'll be back in terms of the playoff timeline, but still, that's a big blow to them. And honestly, it's pretty interesting because that should, you would think in theory, allow Kevin Durant to start averaging more points per game soon. James Harden's average is down a little bit now to 30.5, still averaging 7 assists per game. Kyrie was doing 26.5 still at that point, with 8 assists per game. Durant has dropped down to the 3rd leading scorer for them with 24 points, about 4 assists, about 5 rebounds. So solid for these guys, but honestly, you expect one of these two to pick it up soon because they're down a guy. Something small to be noted is that both James Harden and Kevin Durant made the All-Star team. Obviously, Kyrie would have made it had he probably not gotten injured, but still, 2 of the 3 guys made it because one's injured. Not bad for the Nets. So at the end of the year, we find out the MVP of the league is Luka Doncic. Your rookie of the year is Dylan Windler because there are no rookies added into the game right now until the draft happens on Wednesday. Brandon Clark comes in as 6th man of the year. Giannis gets your defensive player of the year, which I feel like happens literally every single season. Most improved player goes to Jamal Murray. Not surprised by that. And your coach of the year goes to Steve Nash of the Brooklyn Nets. So look through your All-NBA first team. You see Luka, Trae, Giannis, LeBron on a sprained ankle. Not a major injury, but a small one. and Joel Embiid. Your second team is Damian James, ends up going on the second team, which is interesting for him. Kawhi, Anthony Davis, and Bam. Your third team is going to be Steph Curry, Ben Simmons, Kevin Durant gets third team nod, Jimmy Butler, and Nikola Jokic. If you look at all defensive first team, we're not ever going to really see James Harden there. Though he is getting better at defense, he's just not really going to be a first team guy. And on second team, again, not seeing him there either. To look at how he ultimately did, though, he finished pretty strong. Again, with Kyrie being out towards part of the end of the year, James finishes the year in 31 points per game, 5 rebounds, 7.5 assists. Kyrie ends up coming back going to 27, 5 rebounds and 8 assists. Kevin Durant improves his average slightly with 24, 5.5, and then 4.5. So the big three did a pretty good job. The best news for them is they end up getting a #1 seed in the NBA playoffs. They're facing Cleveland in the first round. The Lakers are facing Memphis. Again, we'll see what they can ultimately do here. We're going to sim the first series and see how they do, and hopefully they can end up winning something. So here we go. Simulate the round. They go 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, and it's a sweep. I think pretty much everybody would have imagined that would happen. If somehow Cleveland were to make the playoffs, the Nets would sweep them. In the second round, you have Brooklyn versus Toronto, Boston versus Milwaukee, the Clippers versus Dallas, which, you know, Dallas is making a heck of a play this year, and then the Lakers versus New Orleans. Should be a good round. So we'll go ahead and send this one and see how Brooklyn does. They end up going on a almost choking away. They were up 3-0, I believe. Toronto comes back with 3-0 on their own, and then they end up winning the decisive Game 7 to move on to face Boston in the conference finals. So in the conference finals, you have Brooklyn and Boston as a #1 and #2 seed, and then Dallas and New Orleans. I'm kind of blown away. New Orleans actually upsets the Lakers here, which is kind of wild. So we'll simulate the first game. Brooklyn ends up going 1-0. We'll go through and do the second game. Brooklyn goes up 2-0 on Boston. Remember, Boston actually had a similar record to them the entire season. The third game is 3-0, but again, Brooklyn almost blew a big series against the previous opponent. They get the 4-0 sweep. Dallas again versus New Orleans will simulate the rest of that round. Dallas ends up going 4-1. So it's Luka versus James and company. Who's going to get the job done? We're going to see what we can ultimately do here. Go game by game. Dallas takes game 1. Game 2 goes to the Nets. So they tie things up there. Go to game 3. Dallas answers back. Does the pattern continue with Brooklyn taking one? They don't. This is wild. So they have a 3-1 lead. Can the Nets battle back? And we'll simulate. The Nets come back with 1. But the Dallas Mavericks end up winning the title. Luka gets the MVP, averaging 41 points per game, 10 rebounds, 10 assists per game. I mean, those are some LeBron James numbers right there. That is incredible. If we go ahead and look at the series, though, I mean, look here. In game 6, Luka was incredible. 34, 15, and 13. If we go ahead and look at the Nets, I mean, James Harden did his part. 41, 4, and 8. He had 4 turnovers, but still, he shot 8 for 15 from the 3-point line. Kyrie balled out. It looks like Kevin Durant might have been the weakest link here. Going to game 1, Luka put up a crazy 55 points in the first game. We see Kyrie drops 48 and 10. Durant does 23 and 6. James Harden didn't show up big in that game. On to game 2, Kyrie goes 31, 7, and 6. Harden with 20 gets a triple-double there. Durant, similar numbers. If we see Luka, 26, 4, and 7. Porzingis played really well there too. Into game 3, Kyrie goes 36, 3, and 7. Durant balls out. So I gave Durant a little bit of flack there, but it looks like Harden is somehow choking so far at this point. Luka goes 43 and 13 and 10. A crazy triple-double again. Game 4, Luka drops another 40 bomb, 46, 10, and 13 at this point. If you look at the Nets, Kyrie was probably the most consistent one so far. I mean, he is probably the most playoff experience of those guys right now. But 39, 1, and 7. Harden 23, 5, and 8. Durant, though, slipped a little bit. Game 5, again, Luka, an incredible 43, 13, and 14. And then if you look at the Nets, Kyrie 44, 6, and 10. James Harden 36, 8, and 13, and 5. I mean, a heck of a game by Harden there. And then we saw what happened here in the final game, number 6. Harden puts up a crazy thing, but early in the series, when they were losing a lot of those games, James kind of didn't get the job done. So as interesting as that trade ultimately is, it looks like 2K says that while the Nets might get to the finals, they ultimately won't get the job done, which doesn't really matter if you get to the finals if you can't win it. Again, I want to hear from you guys. Do you think a James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant team in Brooklyn can get to an NBA Finals and win it. How good do you think they are? How bad do you think they would ultimately be? Will that trade actually happen, or will James Harden go somewhere else? Let me know in the comments down below. Leave a thumbs up on the video if you haven't. Subscribe if you haven't as well, and I'll catch you guys on the next video real soon.